Except where them haters, where them hoes, where them throws, you know what I'm saying? Cecil.
You know, this really has some significance for me. As somebody, he used to be called an Oreo. If you don't know what an Oreo is, that means it's a black person who's black on the outside, white on the inside. I've also been accused of being too soft in my lifetime, right? And every once in a while, I'm accused of being a bad black person if I don't follow along with every agenda from so-called black circles. And then I will let someone down who will go, I thought you were different than the rest of them, who's not black, if I happen to agree with something that comes out of the black circles. I can't just be about truth and right. And this is definitely a martial arts black people crossover. I don't know if you can see the screen. This says this is the 10 basic stops that victims of racism should practice in speech and or action. It was created by the author Neely Fuller Jr., who was the inspiration for the late Dr. Frances Cress Welsing in her book, The ISIS Papers. Neely Fuller Jr.'s first book, the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook workbook for victims of racism and white supremacy. I remembered it. That was his seminal work, and her ISIS papers drew from that. Now, where I've drawn from Neely Fuller Jr. in terms of martial arts is that a lot of this stuff he has here directly applies to self-defense. But the thing is, what I notice from a lot of people who swear they are the ultimate in black culture, I don't hear a lot of people talking about these stops. And every time I look at a video on YouTube that's supposedly about these stops, they never have a lot of views. I'll just go through them real quick. Stop snitching, stop name calling, stop cursing, stop gossiping, stop being discourteous, stop stealing, stop robbing, stop fighting, stop killing, stop squabbling. Now, especially for self-defense, snitching doesn't really apply. And to me, calling the cops because somebody robbed you is not snitching. But name calling. See, where he talks about name calling and cursing, even gossiping, being discourteous, squabbling, that all goes against the Taekwondo tenet of courtesy and the Judo tenet of mutual welfare and benefit. So if you would implement those, you would cover about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these stops. Possibly more, because sometimes people get the killing and fighting, numbers 9 and 8, because of something that someone said to them, or the way someone acted towards them, or the way that they look. So if any representatives from what I call the hood cult are watching these, the only thing I see a lot of them try to say that we need to do more of is stop snitching. But for them, they don't mean snitching to hurt someone else just so they look good. They mean don't report crimes to law enforcement. That's not stop snitching. You're not a snitch because you report that somebody's selling drugs. You're a snitch if you were the person's connect for the drugs, and in order to reduce your time, you turn in your clients. That's an example of a snitch. Stop robbing and stop fighting and stop killing. Wouldn't that be something if we could do that? If every human being would do that. But see, I know human beings are not going to do that, because I think it's in human nature to be combative and to quarrel, and unless you actively work against it, it's not something that's going to come naturally to you. So if you're curious, you can Google the 10 basic stops like I did, and make sure you put the name Neely Fuller in there, or else you're going to get makeup tutorials like I did. You're going to get some makeup tutorials. And here is another thing that I'm going to zoom in on this, that I think is really, really helpful. And this is something that will work regardless of race. This is a universal concept. Sometimes you got to look at some of the things that even may rub you the wrong way. I have, like I said, I've gone to Stormfront websites to try to learn stuff. I'll read just about anything because you may come across some universal wisdom. This one, stop fighting. Right here where he says people should not fight as long as they can talk to each other, and they should talk to each other in such manner as to minimize conflict and or to better promote justice. When people cannot talk to each other without trying to maim or do other bodily harm to each other, they should then do everything they can to minimize or eliminate contact with each other. When people have no contact with each other, directly or indirectly, they cannot have conflict with each other. So that's something that I think that we need to do as people. Just minimize, don't hang out with people unless you know you're going to be about something or you're doing something for a constructive purpose. If it's not constructive, you really don't need to be getting together. Now, I think this might go contrary to Neely Fuller Jr.'s beliefs. I would consider getting together to have fun as something constructive because that's a positive thing, in my opinion. But if your fun is at the expense of other people, that's not a positive thing. And see, this right here to me is a martial arts tenet, or it should be. It is correct for all persons to do all they can to avoid being involved in any form of, quote, violence. And right here, it is also correct for all persons to try to keep circumstances from being so imbalanced that counter-violence is required in order to promote justice. And he has when he thinks that people should only use counter-violence. His is in terms of racism. I'm saying in terms of protecting yourself from harm, period, especially when you're talking about the martial arts. So I think I've rambled on enough. But again, the thing I like to point out is I always hear people talk about, yeah, this with the race and that stuff. But what about the thing and all this stuff right here? This is stuff that he thinks that people should do with each other that don't involve people who are outside of the quote unquote black community. I really do think that if people would do these things, if you stop trying to harm people with your, basically, if you stop trying to harm people with your words and your actions, would not the world be a better place? Yes, it would. But since people can't do that, you might as well get yourself a gun and practice the martial arts. Peace.